today to discuss this, I have the pleasure of having Andrea Illy, who's the chairman of the famous Illy coffee. I have Bernhard Kowatsch, who is head of the Innovation Accelerator at the UN WorldFood program. And I have the pleasure of Marcello Palazzi, who has founded many things, among others, the co-founder of Bindslev Europe, which is one of the instrumental ways by which we can certify transition in companies in the food industry. We aim to answer this question: what would be needed to fully create a biodiverse market for food? I think it's important that we recap why that is important. Because we're here because our lives have been disrupted. Like, we've disrupted the lives of the species on this planet with the explosive growth of us, humans, and the animals and the raw materials that serves our existence. We've somewhat created a linear, finite, and extractive system in an environment, look outside the windows, which carries the wisdom of an infinite, regenerative, and complex system. The consequence is that human health is in an emergency state, and we have a catastrophic biodiversity loss around the planet. It's also the sensation, I feel personally, and from the people I've talked to since I arrived, is that we crave a reconnection and balance. We also know that, and recently from COVID, that when we feel connected to other people and to the nature around it, we have this sensation of vulnerability, courage, and we also feel that it's the birthplace of visions and great ideas. So I think we here in Klosters is part of a personal journey as well as a communal journey, because we are driven by hope and the ability of us humans to change and create when we are faced with adversity. I personally feel connected to this subject because from when I was just starting out in my career in 1990, I have exported the global commodity, food commodities from the global south to the global north in shipping companies. I have transported dairy products around the world and forced people to buy more than they really need in supermarkets. I have then had an awakening 20 years ago, and then I started creating organic products and started educating consumers why organic is better. And obviously only able to sell those products because they carried a high price tag and such. I had to create aspiration and lifestyle around them. It should be something for all of us. I've also had the opportunity to have the most amazing platforms to do this. Early on, my first client was Prince Charles, who comes here to Klosters. I have had 8 years with Paul McCartney. We have launched Meat-Free Mondays. We've created big global movements, and yet it's just not enough. You know, we're still here. But while I feel grief and super responsible, I also feel that we are in this birthplace of hope and also of love for each other and love for the nature around us. So I think that's important to remember when you're here. We're here because we want to change, and we're here because we want, and we feel that we can play a little part in creating solutions. Okay, so let's deep dive into today's panel. I'm going to start with asking each of you a couple of questions, and then we can begin to sort of open it up a little bit. Marcello, I'd love to start with you. Like me, you've created and helped many companies and wider initiatives in the food industry over the decades. I see B-Lab in the industry emerging as a great template for retrofitting existing business models into the industry. And this model actually both incorporates the complexity of our food system. It allows for the complexity of food system, but it also recognizes the shortcomings of it and the failures that we've had. And biodiversity, of course, is one of these parameters. In the B-Lab system, the B Corp system, where does biodiversity come in and how is it expressed?
So thank you very much, Erik. Can you hear it? Does it work? Yes? Can I do without it?
Yeah, without it.
Yeah, without it? Okay, great. So you hear me, I'll try to speak a little bit louder. So thanks, Erik. I'm really pleased to be here for many reasons. One reason is that I've been an entrepreneur since I was 21, and together with my father, we started a company that actually developed laboratories and test kits for water analysis, soil analysis, in order to diminish the quantity of fertilizers that still are a problem in the world. And this was 30 years ago. And so I'm reminding myself because of what Erik asked me. And then secondly, specifically on this work, I have with a very good friend of mine in the Netherlands, Dr. Martin Lancaster. I've been co-chair of his foundation, which is called the Avalon Foundation, which has been promoting organic agriculture around the world for over 30 years. And then the B Corp. So I co-founded the B Corp movement in Europe 5 years ago. We now have 800 companies. And I did my homework this morning, and globally we have 3,600 companies. So B Corps, the B stands for benefit, and we have a certification, and we also have a legal form called the Benefit Corporation, of which we have 12,000 companies around the world, including 500 in Italy, which is the main country in Europe that has promoted the Benefit Corporation. We have 400 food B Corps. So, and I give you some names, you will know, Patagonia and Patagonia Provisions. Patagonia Provisions is actually all around regenerative agriculture. They created a regenerative organic label, including a number of other progressive companies, and they are in a way creating the standards of what it means. We have Numi Organic Tea, we have Cabot Creamery, Rhino Foods, Revolution Foods, Tony Chocolonely, the slave-free chocolate. I can go on and on and on. In Italy, we have Fratelli Carli olive oil, we have Fezza vineyards, we have other wine companies around France, Austria. And I can go on and on. Unilever owns 8 B Corps, including Mea Terra, which is organic products made in Brazil. Plum Organics, first company that made organic baby food, imagine 10 years ago. Procter & Gamble bought the company. Innocent Drinks, etc., etc. But the real point I want to answer your question is, and that's why I think it's very cool that the idea was, can we do something together? So we've started in energy. So we have about over 400 B Corps in energy. We created an energy coalition that actually already raised $60 million to create a renewable energy town in California. So we see all these connections coming from, so there are so many issues. It's a system thinking at its best, but you've got issues that have to do with natural resources, water, energy, the social dimension of people, human beings, farmers. So because with 400 companies, you have all this diversity, you can connect all these different companies and do quite a lot. So I think that my action is, can we do something together with you here and with some of the 400 B Corps. Biodiversity, so I think the most exciting initiative now was started by Danone. So Danone, food company, Danone is 40% certified as a B Corp. Emmanuel Faber, the CEO, is a very progressive visionary. He has created an initiative called Business for Biodiversity, which is run by the OECD, together with Andrea Illy, who is the Secretary General of the OECD, including 24 multinationals working on biodiversity. So I'll invite you to Google and look it up. This is multinationals working in this space. And I think that of what I've seen, so 30 years ago, I started another network with Ben Cohen and Anita Roddick. That was called Social Venture Network. It is still called Social Venture Network. And I learned, and I worked with Anita Roddick for 3 or 4 years, setting up a business school. And what was really key for me is to understand that you always need to have a customer. So often we forget, sustainable food, organic food, but someone has to buy these products. And Anita was a master. She went to the Amazon to actually start buying these nuts in the rainforest because she knew that she could sell them to someone. So you always have to have a customer. And this is one of the challenges. And then the other thing that I was discussing with my good friend Oliver Carriers, who's here, you also have investors who invest in your company. So we got to be pragmatic as well. So customers, investors, and then the third piece about this systems thinking is, of course, you have to have the sort of framework conditions, the policy infrastructure. You have to have governments, or at least, sometimes it's a region, it's a city that encourages the sort of good biodiversity. So with these are some of the elements that I think are essential. It's slow, but I see there is a real combination. There is a momentum now. So I will leave it at that and look forward. Thank you, Erik.
Now, obviously, it transpires that we've had both in the whole gambit of consumerism, educating consumers. Anita Roddick was a great pioneer. We've had people within fashion and food. What I always see is that you have a tremendous, sort of have to reinvent the wheel every time. The access to biodiverse crops or crops that is actually produced to suit human health and planetary health is often difficult. Do you agree that some of the most difficult aspects of stating a vision that is truly biodiverse and actually doing it could be to actually bridge the communities, the markets, the produce with the consumer or with the customer?
In general, I agree, but I think that because I've been sitting in the NGO world, and the philanthropy world, and the business world, we often make the mistake that we think, good ideas don't sell on their own. You have to create, you have to have a customer, you have to have the investors, you have to have the infrastructure around you that supports it. Because I make the comparison with energy, this transformation from say industrial agriculture to a more renewable, sustainable, regenerative agriculture is very similar to the energy transition. We've been basically building an energy infrastructure for 200 years with oil and oil companies, and that's been the biggest hiccup, the biggest challenge is how to actually dislodge all these incumbents that have been basically controlling the market and controlling the customers. So it is complicated. And I've seen one of the most interesting examples, we have a few B Corps in the slow food movement. The slow food movement was born in Italy, it's become global. I've been to the biggest event was in San Francisco with 10,000 people. The slow food movement has been great, but it is not yet mainstream. And other products, like for example, one of the most interesting B Corps is in Argentina. It's called Guayaki. Guayaki makes yerba mate. Yerba mate is traditional tea drank in Argentina, but in cans and bottles. It's now a $100 million business. They sell most of them in California, and all the profits, after paying costs and salaries, goes back to actually revitalize the land in Argentina, land that otherwise would be quite degraded.
Brilliant.
So you have these kind of models, but they're still not mainstream.
Good. So, we can talk about how to truly create this marketplace afterwards, perhaps, through some of these companies. Andrea, happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
42 years old.
Yes, 42.
You probably more than anybody here in the room have sort of been in the space for a long time, because coffee is one of the great, wonderful commodities of this world. And I've also had the privilege of working both with cocoa and coffee, and I'm somewhat literate to the complexity that these commodities have in the sourcing of them, but also in the, I would say, the direct retrofitting of the supply chain in order to fit sort of the planetary health as well as the human health. When did you personally first realize that coffee as a commodity had a very important role to play when we were talking about ecology and environment?
Good.
Do you remember?
Yes, I remember. Yes. So probably when I was a little child, because I grew up with coffee, and my father was so involved that can you hear me?
Yes.
He was so involved that, of course, as a kid, I was perceiving coffee as the most important thing in the world. And so this is how also I became a chemist myself, etc. But let me be a little bit more accurate in the answer, because so first of all, our company Illy Caffe, which is a 100% still a 100% family business, was born upon my grandfather's dream to serve the greatest coffee to the world. This is simple to be said, but as you can imagine, it's not easy to be, let's say, developed. And the greatest doesn't necessarily mean only the greatest taste, but it also means the greatest practices, the way of doing things. Of course, when you really, of course, creates is not only quality, it's really the perception and to do things in the best possible ways. So it's a very engaging and passionate journey for any stakeholders involved. So this is what we pursue in our life. It's more what has been recently described, the kind of to have companies that needs to have not a goal,
Purpose.
the purpose. Thank you. This is the exact word I was looking for. So yes, why not having coffee contributing to changing the world as a role model, and also in the way we do. So as a consequence of this vision, of course, we are focusing the top pyramid of quality and super premium segment in the market. And so we need to source the best possible coffee. Our mission is to delight consumers all over the world, seeking the best, the quality in life, with the best coffee nature can provide, enhanced with the best technology and the beauty in the arts, beauty in the visual, to enrich the coffee experience. But the pillar is the best coffee nature can provide. So after having sourced coffee from the market for nearly 60 years, we reached a limit of how good quality and how enough quantity we could source from the market, and we decided to pioneer direct sourcing, starting working hand in hand with coffee growers, starting from Brazil, which is the leading country for coffee volumes, originally only for coffee volumes. Now they are also a leading country for coffee quality. So we started that by with an award which is now titled after my father Ernesto Illy Award. We now give this award after 25 years. We give it to the 3 top producer in 9 of the best 9 countries where we source the coffee of our blend, and this is a ceremony that we do in New York at the United Nations. But just to tell you that how important became this award for our strategy. And through this award, we started conveying the message of sustainable quality. Sustainable quality, because I can give a lecture you about how really every single, let's say, aspect of the product quality can only be reached if there is sustainability behind. Okay? I give you an example. If you exceed with agrochemistry, then you will have some residues which might not contribute to the taste of your product, but it might be to contribute to your health, because you don't want to have and so on. Everything is interconnected, because when you talk about sustainability, it's the triple bottom line: economical, social, and environmental altogether. So of course we had immediately to discover that we had to transfer knowledge. So we created this University of Coffee, which now exists since over 20 years, which has 28 places in the world, 3 departments, one for the coffee growers, 1 department for the professionals of the hospitality, and 1 for coffee lovers, with over 30,000 participants per year. So this effort to spread the, let's say, knowledge about quality is really so important for our strategy. and eventually this led us to be in the capacity to source coffee which has been made, specially done for us, to exceed any of the best market quality standard, official standards, and prepare this coffee especially for Illy through direct sourcing. Of course, in order to create an incentive for those growers to work with us hand in hand, long term, committed to quality and sustainability, we had to create a significant incentive. So we paid them on average 30% ahead of the best market price. But when it comes to connection, or the central connection with biodiversity, biodiversity is the first time I have the opportunity to articulate the relationship between biodiversity and our work. And let me say first that coffee is agriculture, and we have to remember that agriculture is one of the most important industry in terms of impact in environmental damage. It's responsible for at least 25% of greenhouse gas emissions. It's responsible for a lot of the pollution in terms of water and land. It's responsible for most of the land change use. And what is really very damaging is that it's responsible for jeopardizing the so-called biogeochemical cycles, which make the process of maintaining let's say our ecosystem stable, and this is due to the so-called green revolution, which made agriculture to be extremely productive and capable of feeding the 6 or 7 extra billion citizens after it was designed, but it also has a price to pay, which is this environmental impact. Well, biodiversity is at the core of this problem, because pushing too far the bar of productivity through monoculture and intense fertilization and defensive chemical defenses is what created damage. So we have now to go back to, let's say, an old-fashioned agriculture, as you would say, and this can be done by boosting biodiversity. It can sound a little bit odd, but I'm talking more specifically about the soil biodiversity, because there is this correlation between how much biomass, organic matter you have in the soil, and how rich is the microbiota, and how this microbiota, soil microbiota, generates defenses to the plant against the pathogens, and so you get rid of most of the necessity to use agrochemicals. You also have much better soil health and water retention. It becomes a kind of a magic agriculture, which doesn't necessarily has to compromise so much with the productivity. In coffee, we have both. We have this regenerative agriculture in the very native and natural ecosystems, like in Africa, where on the other side, coffee is a kind of subsistence agriculture for them, but at least is very well balanced with the environment, as opposed as Brazil, which is a country where productivity has been pushed very, very, very high level, although there is a good sensitivity for biodiversity. By example, it's mandatory by law to have these so conservation areas in the plantation, minimum 20-25% of the total surface plant that needs to be natural reserve with forestry. So there is also there the opportunity to go back to something more, let's say, biodiverse.
Perfect.
This is what we do. I personally took me personally 1 year of sabbatical to study a model of agriculture which I call virtuous, because following the IPCC recommendation, it seeks the double benefit for the environment, for the human health as well. So we also have the opportunity now to discover the correlation between how you grow your food and how is your health benefit, because it's all about, you know, the chemical composition that you get in your food.
That's fantastic to hear. And also, I mean, this is, you know, we've got to have a workshop on the EAT Forum, and that was, you know, the big report that came out is the correlation between planetary health and human health in data, which we're all so fond of. We kind of know it.
Yes, we are very much in the same turf, so
Yeah.
we say. And I know very well the work of the EAT Foundation and the paper they publish, Food, Planet, Health, and so yes, it's very synergistic.
And we should have had Gudrun here, but we have the pleasure of having Bernhard instead.
Doing my best.
Bernhard, welcome.
Thank you.
You work at the UN sort of tirelessly trying to come up with innovation to end hunger for the world's poorest people. A lot of, you enlightened me yesterday with your work, a lot of it in emergency help. So over decades, approaches have then been tried and tested, and some failing, others succeeded, like everything else in life. And also in the recent emergence within the UN system, we've had a lot of affordable ag-tech solution being deployed, the green revolution that Andrea was referring to. But as strong evidence have shown from both the developed as well as the developing world, the smart solutions often results in unintended consequences, such as massive biodiversity loss, both of crops and non-crops, so the environment around the growing areas. And they also seem to create a disconnection between the land and the people, which we've grown up with here in Europe and is now happening in the developing world, but also between the communities themselves. In your work, do you see any signs of you perhaps beginning to, in the UN realm, not necessarily innovation space, that you begin to revise and perhaps modify the approach to this and incorporate more holistic views on growing food in aid?
No, I think it's a very good question. I'll try to cover this more from a holistic perspective, from developing countries, also like providing food for everybody on this planet. And I think Andrea also gave good examples from in developing countries, one of the issues that we're facing globally is so that 690 million people are still suffering from hunger. So one of the questions when we talk about biodiversity, in particular on marketplaces, okay, how can we get there? I mean, even right now we have enough food on the planet to actually, so everybody could actually have lead a healthy life because there's enough food here on the planet. Now clearly there's a question about growth of population and so on, and then there's local context what you have to consider. Yes, there has to be political stability, that you have to end conflict. There's natural disasters in these contexts. As well, food program right now, we provide food assistance, in emergencies to in natural disasters, whenever you hear in Afghanistan, Syria, Bangladesh, Colombia, wherever it is, that's where we provide emergency aid. But we also work with smallholder farmers, social safety net programs, so sustainably lifting people out of hunger. And I do think that generally speaking, I think there has been I would say a massive shift in a lot of these conversations from okay, we provide just emergency assistance, and well, that's kind of the ambulance driver, right? You help, and then after the ambulance is gone, you're on your own. To really also look at this, okay, what can we do even right now in emergency assistance to help people rebuild their lives, and for instance, smaller farmers do things that are smarter, right? And there's so what we are trying to really foster is when there's local ecosystems with smaller farmers. Now, putting my innovation hat on, also because that's what my day job also is, we're looking at new innovations that could be market solutions or Sometimes it's blockchain. I know not everybody's happy about blockchain. It doesn't have to be blockchain at all, but it's what is the opportunity right now that we have right now that we didn't have 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years ago. One of the aspects that we have right now is we have those technologies. There's mobile phones, we have satellite data, there's lots of things that like small farmers, they don't actually have to change what they do. There's small little tweaks that all of a sudden they can become a lot more efficient using the same crops, using the same activities, but maybe they're better informed about rainfall or when to plant, when to harvest. And a lot of these things is, I think we have to look at these aspects from like, how do we leave no one behind in this aspect? Like it's, I think in a lot of the biodiversity discussion, otherwise when people talk about this, I think if you focus on like the upper end market, I think that's fine too, and you need to do that as well. But at the same time, I think you should also look at this as like how can you actually create more sustainable income and like the longer term effects for people who are currently vulnerable and poor in a lot of countries.
That makes sense. I mean, and also perhaps just admitting that we're dealing with super complex systems and that we don't have the answers.
I mean, it is challenging. Like, I think it's like there is no silver bullet, and I think we do have to rely on like, I mean, we talk about the power of like, you know, entrepreneurship, about like, you know, businesses to actually create this, talking about marketplaces where it's like, if we are serious about doing this, we will need new approaches, but that involve the people locally. And if it's local entrepreneurs, people locally that actually, like, it's their solution, not somebody coming in from outside. Exactly. I think this is one of the aspects that also that make me like, you know, positive about the change that can happen by supporting, you know, entrepreneurs, communities, groups that are actually on the ground.
Good. I mean, I think this is one of them, and I think what we've heard from all three here, but certainly all of us here in the room, is that we don't have a silver bullet, we don't have a single answer. And the way that perhaps we have created collaboration have been in more exchange of monetary value or value creation that way. And what is really needed is a much deeper partnership where all the stakeholders win, not just the Amazons and the Googles and the Monsantos of this world.
No, I wanted to mention one thing. You know, you were in Switzerland here. You know, I was lucky. I went to school in Lugano for years. I started to learn about the biodynamic agriculture, Rudolf Steiner. And you know, I now live in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, we have a bank that became a B Corp called Triodos Bank. Triodos Bank is in the Netherlands, Belgium, Spain, UK, and a little bit in France. And they grew up from this anthroposophical Rudolf Steiner culture. So biodynamic agriculture has been around for a long time. It's not very new. But the challenge is that this is another, so I was reading this report that Triodos Bank publishes on their website. If you go and you see, it's a report on how do we transform agriculture towards regenerative agriculture. And one of the issues they really talk about is they call it corporate dominance. That we have a lot of very big companies that control the food chain. And I think, you know, some of you know the NGOs have come up with this chart, and there are 50 companies in the world, they control 90% of the food supply, the food chain. So there is a real problem about the corporativism, and this is where I want to make a little pitch for Illy. You know, Illy is a family business. It's a very different kind of culture. You don't have to give your, you know, quick profits to the shareholders like you do with Unilever or Nestle and so on. So there is a real, and this is not just food, this is about other industries as well. This is one of the issues we face. That how do we get away from this you know, financialization of the economy, where a lot of these big companies are owned by sort of anonymous shareholders, versus the more kind of family business. And also, one we didn't talk about, but is very important, is the cooperative movement. I mean, they've lost a lot of, say, energy, but for 150 years, all over the world, we have agricultural cooperatives that try to do what we are talking about now. So maybe there's a way of helping these cooperatives become more entrepreneurial, and using the data and the digital things that you were talking about. I see there is a real opportunity there to do that. So what I'm saying is that solutions are there. We know, like, biodynamic agriculture has been around for 40, 50 years, but we need to really scale them and disrupt some of these forces that are controlling the economy. So, you know, whether it's Illy coffee or whether it's Patagonia provisions, these sort of family-owned, community-led some, and not others, but much more connected to the locality and the region, are very, very important in this transition.
I mean, I can speak endless about that because I left the corporate world at 30 and now 50, and that was for that very reason. I could not get any progression in the corporate system. It just took too long. I was frustrated. But it brings me to the next sort of big lever, and we've talked a lot about this. There's a couple of things. A little side note, by the way, we all have to think about where our pension funds, our investments, all of that, where that sit, where they sleep at night, and who they're sleeping with. Because it is the single, after not tuning down our media intake, that is the single most important lever. So call your fund manager when you get off this forum and talk to them.
Erik, can I ask a question related to this?
Just have one more point. I think pivoting into the next one is the calculation, the marketplace, which is what this panel is about, and how the marketplace over the years have been completely skewed towards fitting this efficiency, zero nutrients for people. All these terrible things have happened through the system that we have created. And the talk about changing the global financial system in order to really calculate the full cost of food. So these things that we now take as externalities have never been externalities. The cost to the environment of creating monoculture coffee or pulling down rainforests to create coke plantations, it has a real cost, which is going to be picked up in the future. And in the place up here in Europe, we have been paying for it for decades through our tax money, because we're cleaning up our environment and we're paying taxes, and it's a mess, and it still is a mess. So how do we change that is a big question in the financial world. But that also means that we have to kind of, I think, create a coalition of the willing, have the deeper collaboration that we talked about and the challenge we put in the room the last session. And perhaps we'll open it up to the room now and ask, maybe tell the personal experience or have some comments to what we've been talking about here. How do we move the old marketplace to the side and create a new marketplace that can be local, regional, global, that really has a more holistic and a complex and systemic approach to markets, and actually a more democratic approach and a more true capitalistic approach, which is not concentrated in dualistic sort of marketplaces that we're seeing now. What is needed to fully create a biodiverse market for food is?
Innovative new solutions that are driven by entrepreneurs locally.
Marcello, my dream collaboration to tackle biodiversity would be?
It's what Andrea said, we go back to agriculture as it used to be, plus what you said, Bernhard, about the digital and the data. So we have to make a sort of sandwich between the old and the new, and that will be my formula.
All right, third. I'll have to go back to the latter. What is needed to create a biodiverse market for food is?
Well, as I anticipated, knowledge and investments. But before that, strong willingness to do so, which is about ethics. We have to completely, as Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum said, we have to reset. But make sure that when you restart, you start a new program, not the old one. The old program is about an extractive and linear society. It's not sustainable because even though rich resources are limited and the ecosystems are, we have one world. So we have to transition after this reset into a regenerative and circular world where we can not only be sustainable in what we consume, but also start regenerating what we damaged in the past. And it's totally feasible. As far as the scientific knowledge is concerned, it's all there. Technology can be developed shortly. There are people in the room who are making incredible stories of just which can teach us how much can be done in such a short period of time.
Beautiful. I'm going to leave you with a quote by Carl Jung, not by Rudolf Steiner, who's amazing also, a prophet. But he said, apparently, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Now I think we should all trust our knowing. We should lead with our hearts. Let's make this world a better and much kinder place. Thank you.